أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. He moves on into a new chapter here of khawf and huzn. Khawf and huzn, you'll translate khawf to fear and huzn to grief. Yeah. And so this is also one of the stages, according to him, of Akhlaaq. And he wants to talk about it a little bit. So first, of course, he wants to define khawf and khashya. He wants to define khawf and huzn. He says, look, khawf is one thing. It shouldn't be mistaken with khashya and rahba, because these are used interchangeably lots of times. Okay, khawf, khashya, rahba. He says, look, khashya and rahba, these are kind of synonymous. Okay, they are very similar in meaning. What is khashya? He says it's that state that you have within you when you are affected by something, where there is a change in you. Something happens within you. Okay, and it has to do with understanding the grandeur of things. Rahba, same thing. Khashya, rahba. But khawf, he says, is something like that, but in addition to that, you will take practical steps as well as a result. Okay, these are two different things, he says, kind of. Okay, and then he wants to point out how, although we're going to be talking about khawf and huzn, but he says, let me just talk about khashya a little bit, and then I'm going to put that aside. So the chapter is chapter of khawf and huzn, remember that. But khashya, he just goes a little on a tangent here, explaining what that is and how great it is. And then he makes his way back to khawf. He says that khashya, in the verses of the Quran, this khashya is higher than khawf. Okay? For example, in the Quran we have إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, that verily out of the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which ones have khashya of Allah? The ones who are ulama of his servants. Now here ulama doesn't necessarily mean scholar in the narrow sense of the term. Those who have knowledge, they will have khashya. Innama means verily. So it's really restricting it to this group. So it's very important for somebody who really wants to get somewhere, to have khashya of Allah. To have khashya of Allah, they have to be of those who are knowledgeable as well. This just highlights how important it is for us as Muslims to gain more and more knowledge about the religion. Not just the basic Sunday school stuff, more. Why? Because it will bring a khashya. Khashya is something that happens inside of you. Okay? It moves you from inside. You understand the greatness of something from within you. Although on the outside nothing might even change. Okay? إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء, Surah Fatir, verse 28. And then he also says, it brings another verse, يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ وَيَخَافُونَ سُوءَ الْحِسَابِ, that there are people that they have khashya of their Lord and fear of su'al hisab, of having a bad hisab, a bad reckoning on the Day of Judgment as a result of the bad deeds they've done in this life. Okay, so it's pretty cool. These are observations of Ayatollah Jawadi, not a person like me. It's very interesting how he says, look, in this verse you have two things. Khashya of the Lord, khawf of su'al hisab. Khashya of the Lord, because the Lord deserves khashya. But khawf of su'al hisab, which is fear of having a bad Day of Judgment. And so as a result, what are you going to do? You're going to get up and actually do something about it. But it doesn't say khawf of Allah here. It says khashya of Allah. I personally think that wherever you have khawf, not necessarily will you have khashya with it. And we'll talk about that. He'll give us some more examples. But if you have what was I saying? If you have khawf of something, it doesn't necessarily mean you have khashya of it. But if you have khashya of something, it'll be entailed by and with khawf for sure. You can't have khashya of something but not have khawf of it. So let me repeat that, and we'll see some examples. You can have khawf of something, which means what? Which means you have a fear of something, and you'll do something about it. Doesn't necessarily mean now you have a khashya of it too. From within, you shake and tremble at the thought of it. Okay? And he'll give a good example. Just bear with me for a little bit. But the flip side, when you have khashya of something, that means from your core, you are understanding the greatness of that thing. Then of course, khawf will come with it as well. A person who has khashya will have khawf of that thing as well. He doesn't point this out. This is just my understanding here. And then he says that in Surah Bayyinah, verse 8, so that was يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ يَخَافُونَ سُوءَ الْحِسَابِ, that's Surah Ra'ad, verse 21. He says in Surah Bayyinah, verse 8, also it tells us that those who have khashya have a special rank, have a special station in Allah's eyes. ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ رَبَّهُ. That this is, ذَلِكَ means this is for, ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ, this is for the one who's what? Khashiya Rabbah, has khashya of his Lord, not necessarily khawf of his Lord. And so I want to read for you now, just so that this distinction becomes clearer. I want to read off of this a little bit, what he says. He says, all right, based on all of this, the muwahideen, those who have reached the true tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will never have khashya of other than Allah. But they might have khawf of other than Allah. What was the definition of khawf? Is when you know that something bad might happen, so you will take practical steps to prevent it, maybe, right? Khawf means you're trying to avoid something. You have fear and you want to avoid something. It says these people, they have khashya, that have khashya of Allah, they won't have, they will never have khashya of other than Allah, but it doesn't mean that they won't have khawf of other than Allah. In this, and then he goes on. He says, what I mean by this is that a muwahhid will have fear of a snake, of a scorpion, and is afraid to get stung or bit by them. But he won't have khashya towards it. His khashya is reserved only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, this person knows that if anything out there wants to harm someone or something, it will be in accordance with the permission and command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And nothing out there can help us, benefit us, hurt us, without Him and His permission. So I will have khashya of Him, but at the same time I know that He has given permission. So now I will have khawf of other things sometimes, and I will try to... What is taqiyya all about? The Imams would practice taqiyya. Taqiyya means that, hey, preserve your life, okay, because they're after you. Very simple. Oh, you're not supposed to be afraid of anyone other than Allah. Relax, people. Relax. It says, he gives another example. The honeybee, if it gives us any benefit, it is also by the command of Allah. And then he brings the famous verse, فَاسْلُكِ سُبُلَ رَبِّكَ or رَبِّكِ ذُلَالًا. Surah Nahl, verse 69. فَاسْلُكِ سُبُلَ رَبِّكَ ذُلَالًا رَبِّكِ ذُلَالًا. It's pretty cool. I like this verse because it shows that even when it comes to the honeybee, Allah is the one that's determining how they're supposed to do everything. It's pretty cool. Fasluki means traverse the path of which path? Which way should I take? Subula rabbik. Those paths, that direction Allah has given you, O honeybee. Wa awha rabbuka ila nahl. The Quran says that Allah revealed to the nahl. Subula rabbiki dhulalan, subserviently. Like they have no other choice. Maybe this is dhulalan here because comes from being dhalil, right? Subservient and subjugated as if maybe this is another way of saying that's their instinct. That's how they've been designed and programmed, right? So he says, look, here it's telling us that if anything's going to do anything, it is by the command of Allah, even if it's going to get us benefit. Going back to the snake and the scorpion, it says, مَا مِن دَابَّةٍ إِلَّا هُوَ آخِذٌ بِنَاصِيَتِهَا إِنَّ رَبِّي عَلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Surah Hud, verse 56. That there is not a moving creature out there except that Allah is holding it by its forelock. What do you do? What does this symbolize? Holding something by its forelock. That means you have absolute control over them, right? You can sway them whichever way you like, right? And so here he's saying, look, once again, so a person is not going to have khashya of anything out there because he knows everything goes back to Allah. But khawf is there because we live in a world of cause and effect. I want to avoid certain things, and so I will have no choice but to be very careful on how I tread whatever I'm doing. All right. So having said that, he distinguishes between khawf and those other ones, which were khashya and rahbah. Now we're left with khawf and huzn, fear and grief. Let's talk about khawf, he says, because khawf sometimes is used opposite to huzn. So if we understand huzn, we'll understand khawf. Sometimes he says khawf is used opposite to raja. All right, and sometimes khawf is used opposite to amn. So three things here we want to talk about. Okay, number one, the khawf that is opposite to huzn. He says that usually this is how these two will be defined. Khawf has to do with a fear of losing something in the future when there's a possibility of losing it. I say possibility because I'm gonna, explain something else later. If there's a possibility of losing something in the future and I don't want that to happen, I will have khawf of that thing. That means I have fear of that. Okay. On the other, so it has to do with the future. Number one. Number two, possibility. Okay, so there's two elements here. On the other hand, we have huzn. Huzn doesn't have to do with the future. It has to do with the past and having lost something in the past. Okay. So he says when we say khawf, sometimes khawf is opposite to huzn. Why? Because one is for the future plus possibility, while the other has to do with past. And if it has to do with the past, there's no possibility anymore. Everything has happened in the past. We know. So we have yaqeen towards that, right? And so we will have huzn. He says, let me add to this now. We had this dual categorization here, but let's have one more thing added. That sometimes something has not happened in the past. It happens in the future. It's going to happen in the future, but it's not muhtamal. It's not possible. We know it's going to happen for sure. And that thing which is going to happen in the future is something that we're going to lose. For example, they tell you, I don't know, your friend has a terminal illness and they're going to die in a little bit, right? All right. He says this also can be referred to as that this grief that you have is referred to as huzn. Okay. So I would say the active ingredient in huzn is the fact that you have yaqeen about something, whether it's in the future, and of course if it's the past, we always have yaqeen towards the past. We know because it's already happened. While if there's a possibility and it has to do with the future, then that will be khawf. Okay, that's one. He says also we have khawf that's used opposite to raja. And this one's kind of clear as well, I would say. And mind you, we haven't even talked about what the object of this khawf or huzn is going to be. We haven't even gotten to that yet. We're still defining these terms. It says khawf when it's used opposite to raja. And usually these two are going to be used together, especially in a spirituality context. Okay? Usually they'll say you should have khawf and raja together. Okay? Well, what does raja mean? Raja means hope, yeah. And so khawf sometimes, which is opposite to raja, it will mean to feel like, to lose all hope in something happening in the future. That'll be khawf in that sense, from this perspective. Because raja means hope, that will be lack of hope. It will be the opposite of it, right? And so these two are usually together. They'll say, and we'll talk about this probably more later. As a matter of fact, the next chapter is raja, so we're going to talk about that more later, inshallah. So sometimes this is what khawf means. Khawf means where we have ya'as, as if, and total hopelessness. Okay? And that's why he says that the salik ilallah has to have both khawf and raja. And sometimes it's used opposite to amn. Amn meaning safety. Alright, and feeling secure about something. If it's used opposite to amn, he says, this kind of khawf is good. Okay? The previous khawf, for example, was bad. If a person only has khawf meaning ya'as and hopelessness, that's bad. And we'll talk about that later as well, probably. But this khawf is good, he says. To have a khawf opposite to amn, safety. What does that mean? And to have amn opposite to khawf is a very bad thing. So these two are good and bad. One is bad, one is good. Previous one, both of them were good when they came together. Here, you can't have both. You have to have one of them. One of them is good, one of them is bad. Khawf opposite to amn. He says a person who is khaif with this meaning here that we have, what do? A person who has khawf will engage in making up for the past. But if there's a person who is cold-hearted, stone-hearted, doesn't really think too much, doesn't care too much, is heedless, what do they feel? They will feel no need to go and fix up the past and make up for the past. Understand what they have missed out on and try to fix it. And so this person feels they have amn and aman, safety. They feel safe. They feel like everything's okay, everything's fine. There's nothing I need to change or take care of. Yeah. Well, these kinds of people, you know what? It can reach a point where they feel safe from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even. And Allah's devising and Allah's plot, whatever you want to call it, His makr. The verse says, Surah A'raf verse 99, فَلَا يَأْمَنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. يَأْمَنُوا comes from amn, feeling safe. It says, you know who feels safe from the makr of Allah? Allah is devising. Not that Allah, na'udhu billah, God forbid, Allah is after us and trying to... But look, Allah has a plan in this life for us. If we go by that plan, good things happen. If we don't go by that thing, things might get worse and worse and worse, and we might just go down a hole that we can never get out of anymore. Okay? And so this is part of the plan. Oh, I feel safe that this plan of Allah is never going to... I'm never going to be subject to it. You feel safe about it? Do you want to know who feels safe from the makr of Allah? لا يأمن مكر الله إلا القوم الخاسرون. Only the losers. Why? Because in the end, you're going to be at loss. If you feel like you're safe no matter what, you're going to let go. And you're not going to take care of yourself the way you're supposed to, spiritually. And so you're going to be a loser. Yeah. These people will never, the ones who have this khawf, they will never feel safe that what they have is going to be there forever. So they're always securing it, always taking care of it, always protecting what they have and actually trying to make it grow. And that's why, the hadith that comes to mind in all of this is that famous hadith that the greatest sin is the sin that one deems to be small. Why? Because you feel safe. You're like, we're good. It's a small sin. No. From different angles, if you look at it, that small sin can be a problem. So don't ever underestimate the sin, just like you're not supposed to underestimate Allah's mercy. But don't ever feel safe. As a matter of fact, you open up the books of Maraja, the great sins that they have listed there, shirk, this, that. One of them is to feel safe from the makr of Allah and the punishment of Allah. And no matter what you do, you feel like you're safe, you're good. Whatever your justification and excuse might be. Oh, it's a small sin. It only happened once. I'm a good person. I've done a lot of good in my life. No, never feel safe in that sense. So you see a balance has to be there. So you have khawf, you have amn, feeling safe. This safety is bad versus the khawf that was good. But then there's a good safety, he says as well, which isn't meant here. When you use khawf opposite to amn, the amn there that is meant is the bad one. But there's a good one too, he says. The Quran has talked about. And remember, this is a Quranic discussion that he has. And what is that? The good amn or amniyah or aman, safety? He says the one that Allah has promised to the believers, the abrar, the muqarrabin. Yeah? The verse says, Surah An'am verse 82 says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبَسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. That there are some people who believe, they have iman. وَلَمْ يَلْبَسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ. And they don't cover that iman with dhulm. And here, there's 10 pages Allama Tabatabai talks about the dhulm here. Alright? And he has a lot to say there. It was very interesting. But yeah, I learned some stuff there too. And so, but all in all, you don't commit deeds that will hurt this iman. Those who have iman and don't hurt their iman with a certain type of dhulm, which is the sins, of course. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنِ. They are the ones who will have amn and safety. Well, is this a bad safety? This is good safety. So the amn that comes from me, that I issue for myself, hey, you're safe, you're good, that is bad amn. So we're not supposed to ever feel like that, okay? But the amn that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mamduh. It is praiseworthy, it is good, it is a positive thing. Okay. So we had khawf opposite to, what was the first one? Opposite to huzn. Khawf opposite to raja. Khawf opposite to amn. Amn was a bad thing when it was opposite to khawf. But then there's a good amn. And then he says there's even a higher amn and safety. And he says this is not for everybody again. How many times have we said that? This will not be for everybody. Some who are very special have this one. And that is that a person reaches a point where they don't have any huzn, they have no khawf, they have nothing. Why? Because they have complete amn. Well, how do they have complete amn? That previous one that said those who don't cover their iman with dhulm, they have safety. It's obvious. It means safety from the hellfire, safety from whatever other things that are out there that one wants to be safe from. But this safety, I would say, is kind of like this one that's like the higher one, the higher version. This one is more of a spiritual one, more of a one related to the soul, one related to one's psyche even, you can say, and just outlook. It says they don't have any fear or huzn. Why? Because they have reached the maqam of rida, satisfaction. Well, why don't they have any of these things at all? And as a result, you can say they are safe. They're safe from anything that's going to bother them. Why? Because they know. They don't have fear. You know why? Because they know they're not going to lose anything in the future. What was the definition of khawf? That you think there's a possibility you might lose something in the future, right? That was the definition. What if you're 100% sure you're not going to lose anything in the future? Then you don't have any khawf anymore, right? But who is it out there that is 100% sure they're not going to lose anything? We all go through masa'ib. We all go through hardship and tragedy. He says, well, what's the definition of what you have that you might lose? For them, all that matters to have is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they know that that's never going to cease. Okay? So they have no khawf. We need to hold our ears again. Last week we were holding our ears. We need to hold our ears again a little bit right now too. He says, because the only beloved this person has is haqq, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And God is not something that will ever cease to exist. So we're good. Yeah? Very simple. This is amn at a higher level and degree. Yeah, he says a person will be afraid when there's something out there that can be lost. And then he gives example of wealth, mother, father, brother, son, daughter, these things. But because it's Allah, ma indakum yanfad wa ma indallahi baq. Whatever you have will perish, whatever is with Allah will remain, it says. Yes. As a result, there's no fear. Doesn't have conjecture, doesn't have even a possibility that this person, their beloved, is going to cease, as I said. Yeah. That's for the future. He says the past, same thing. The past is the same. And then so he ends with this verse here regarding this, what we're talking about. He says, and this is what that verse is all about. Ala inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. This person has become waliyullah. Awliyaullah don't have khawf, don't have huzn. Because he's going to say this in a little bit. Having khawf, having huzn, and as was alluded to a little bit in the beginning, is a good thing, is a necessary thing. Okay? So we said all of that. But he says that, but the Quran is also saying that there are some people who don't have khawf, who don't have huzn. What about them? Well, these people have wilayatullah. Inna awliya Allah. Awliya comes from wali, wilaya. They have wilayatullah as a result of having wilayatullah. Meaning what? Meaning everything for them that matters is Allah and Allah's satisfaction. If they're living a normal life like you and I, they are living it within the framework that Islam and Allah wants from them. As a result, the wilayah of Allah encompasses them. They become awliyaullah. As a result, awliyaullah la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. They don't have any of this stuff. But then he repeats, he says, look, this is not for everybody. Those who are in the beginning or even midway through this spiritual wayfaring and suluk. I smile when I say this because I'm reading this as if I've made it to the end and we're going through it. Or those who are at the beginning and then the middle, we're going to get there too, but still it's not enough. We have to get to the end. Who knows? Who knows if we're going to get to the end? I don't know. But it's here. That it's there. They say it exists. He says this is for those people. They reach that point. But on the flip side, having khawf and huzn for those who are in the beginning, midway, this is a fadila, he says. This is virtuous. This is good. It's supposed to be there. It is a form of kamal. Yeah. Until a person reaches a point where they become sure that the bond and link and relationship between them and Allah has become a divine one. And they are sure that this bond will not be, this link won't be broken, okay? Let me explain what he's saying here. He says, these people, remember we said, they don't get scared, they're not upset, nothing. Why? Because what they want and what they like never perishes, never ceases to exist. He goes back and kind of tweaks that a little bit. He says, wait, those who are in the middle or in the beginning of this path, no, it's good to have these things, khawf and huzn. You have to reach a point where you know God does exist and God will never perish and cease to exist. True. But you have to make sure your bond and relationship with Him is not gonna break. So that is what you have to secure. He says that's when you become la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. Yes, you know Allah will never perish, but what about my link to Him? Yeah. So he says once it reaches that point is when you have that blessing of la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. From there on, the same thing that was a virtue, it was a merit for you, now becomes something, I'm not going to say bad, but something that is unnecessary, is irrelevant, not applicable. All right? Because you are now connected and you know that this connection is going to stay. But yeah, how is one going to ascertain that is a different story. We will continue the path of servitude and obedience for as long as it takes, inshallah. And finally, he talks about the origin of khawf. All right, so we're done with that. Let's come back down to earth now. All right, he took us higher. Started with definition of khawf versus khashya, and then khawf itself versus huzn versus raja and versus amn. Now this khawf, that he also wants to tell us that there are different reasons why it takes place, different origins for it. For some people, it is that they have neglected a wajib or they have committed a haram, and so they will have fear. There's a good chance Allah is going to hold me accountable for this on the Day of Judgment or in the barzakh. And so they have this khawf or they have this huzn. Yeah. There's a possibility Allah is going to punish me in the future. That equals khawf. They're upset that they have disobeyed Allah at the end of the day. Huzn. And that's sometimes one of the origins of khawf. Sometimes the origin of khawf is more than that. It's not just neglecting a wajib. He says someone might be adil. Meaning what? Someone who's adil is a person who it takes care of their wajibat, takes care of their harams and stays away from them. Yet this person has a huzn or a khawf that they're going to miss out on the good stuff because they missed, the praying on time today, for example. Yeah. Or they didn't wake up for Fajr. It wasn't their fault. They set the alarm, they just snoozed through it, and the sun rose rose. And so their salat became qada. Is there punishment? No, there's no punishment. But I still remember, I was in the first year of Hawza, and there was this little discussion happening with one of the senior ones. And so one of these kids was talking to one of the senior Hawza students about how they missed salat that day. They slept through it. It wasn't their fault. They didn't the the alarm wasn't able to wake them up, and so they were a little upset and stuff. And so that person told them that, yeah, I mean, you have, whether you like it or not, you've missed something here. You know. Now, I do want to say in parentheses here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the times we're living in, the type of people we are. No one's perfect. All right? No one can be perfect and never miss a salat and so on. But it's interesting how Islam has made it wajib to do qada of salats we missed. And Islam has made it very mustahab to make up mustahab salats I've missed. So if the time for it passes, I'm like, oh, alhamdulillah, it's over. Like, okay, I missed it, but it's mustahab. No, it's still mustahab to make it up. To the point, like, we have like some very nice hadiths on doing qada of salatul layl if you missed it. Ayatollah Bahjat, in one of these sayings of his, he says, they ask him, what do I do so I don't miss salatul layl? He says, make the qada of it. Right? The qada of it, I would say, is harder than the salat itself, because you have to figure out a time a day when you do the salat, when you make it up, right? But I will give you a little cheat code. When you're driving to work, you can pray while moving, and your sajda and ruku. Don't do sajda like bring your head down, because then you'll meet Allah sooner than you would want. So what you need to do is just gestures. Like your ruku is like this, your sajda is like this. You don't have to necessarily put turba on your forehead even. Yeah. So he says, if you really wish to not miss it, then make sure to make a habit of making it up in the day. It's going to be harder than just you'll be like, you know what? I get more rewards if I wake up at night, and it's easier for me because there's just like a slot of time there. Let's just do that. As a matter of fact, if you wake up late and there's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, let's say, left till Fajr, and you won't be able to fit all of Salatul Layl in there, the Maraji have explained how, if you do 4 rak'ah of the 11 before Fajr, then you can continue that and then pray your Salatul Fajr. And that apparently counts as being on time as well. Yeah. Now there are some different fatwas here. Some say go through it quickly. Some will say, no, you don't have to go through it quickly. You can take as long as you want even. But all in all, yeah, we have this out there. So, yeah. There's some people who have this khawf of, oh my God, am I missing out on something? Let me at least make it up. Let me at least make up this mustahab. Now, of course, once again, this is for those who have taken care of their wajib and haram and have the time throughout the day to make it up. Sometimes you don't want to neglect your other wajibat as a result of, doing a lot of mustahabbat. And then there are some, he says, that are higher than this. Yeah. He says these are the ones who have that khawf or huzn that he says, like, they're doing everything they need to do, yet they are upset still. Why would you still be upset? Because here you've passed yourself, and what matters to you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so as a result, you are upset that Allah has done so much for me, and no matter how much I'm trying, I'm not able to still, show my gratitude towards a little bit of what He's done for me. Now this means that a person has to acknowledge and understand what Allah has actually given us. Now the physical side of things is one thing, all the blessings that we've been given. But then even the spiritual side of things and the afterlife related type of things, these are also something to be very grateful about. Allah is giving us eternity and infinity for 50, 60, 100 years of our life. Like, how can we be grateful for that? And so these people, it says that they have that huzn, that, man, like, I want to, but I just can't live up to. I mean, forget Allah. The hadith says you can't even make it up to your mother. You can't even make it up to your mother, let alone Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who brought you into real existence. Right? Yeah. Now, he doesn't mention something else. I was hoping that he would, to the Jawadi. He doesn't speak about it too much, or at all here. Maybe later he will. And hopefully next time, if I remember, I'll bring a little book with a little story in it to share with you. But there's another reason, or I would say, origin for khawf and huzn. And that's something we hear all the time about our greats. And that is the huzn of firaq, it's called, separation. Now, what separation of what? Me from Allah. Well, what do you want? What do you want? What is their definition of whatever the opposite of separation is? Is it oneness with Allah? Is it fana fillah? Is it, what is it? I don't even know what they'll tell us in response. But they are always upset and weeping over what? Just like Yaqub. Yaqub knows that Yusuf is there. Nowhere does Yaqub say, I know he's dead. He never says that. Okay, he knew that Yusuf is alive. That was hard for him. وَابْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ. His eyes went white, it says, out of huzn and grief. Although he knows Yusuf is somewhere, These people are the same. Allah is there, and they even have a relationship with Allah, but they still feel separate from Him, distanced from Him. I guess you can say that the material world for them is their barrier, maybe. These people are, if they push hard enough, it seems that they will reach that al-maut qabla al-maut. That famous hadith that says, mutu qabla an tamutu, die before you die. Yeah, they will achieve something like that. But these are things that come way later as a result of doing what you need to do and being patient and just having Allah, focusing on Allah Himself and nothing else, absolutely nothing else. So that concludes the discussion here so far. But he does have a lot more to say about khawf and huzn and the good and bad types of them. Yeah, if we have a few more pages, inshallah, I'm gonna leave that for next time. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Rahbah. So brother's asking, how is khashya the same as rahmah? I said no. There's another word, rahbah. Rahmah is with a ha. Rahbah is with a ha, the light ha with the two holes. Ashmiya. We call it hayat dochishm in Farsi. It has two eyes, dochishm. So rahbah with a ba. That one has a mim. So rahbah is something else. It is like khashya, he says. Yeah, ra, ha, and ba. That's the root. I wish you had asked in the beginning. I hope no one else thought it was rahmah. Rahbah and khashya, he says, are synonymous usually. And then he drew a thing between this and khawf. These two and khawf. Yeah, you can maybe use depression and an anxiety, but these will have a psychological connotation. These are technical terms in the field of psychology and psychiatry and those things, right? So they will come with their own baggage. And so we won't use those terms usually, but maybe they're, because one has to do with the future, which is anxiety, and depression has to do with the past, one might say, but see, both of them are negative things, anxiety. But while we said here, a lot of these cases of khawf and huzn are good actually, right? That's a very good observation, sister.
As you're on the lower level
Mm-hmm.
and you do what you're supposed to do, say from the do your wajib, are you climbing the ranks passively, or should you be doing things actively, like that would get you there or accelerate your movement, or is it just doing what you're supposed to do?
That's all it is. Should I passively be climbing the ladder of spirituality or actively, right? When it comes to our actions, actively. When it comes to our mindset, passively, I would call it. Passively climb the ladder, meaning don't pay attention to the ladder. Don't be like, oh, where am I right now on this ladder of spirituality? Who cares? All right. All I know is no matter what I do, it won't be enough. So let me just do whatever I got to do as much as I can. So you actively work, but you're passively climbing that ladder. You don't care about it. You're indifferent about it. Neutral, totally neutral. Allah knows what I'm doing this for, and He is the best of upbringers, so to speak. He knows how to train me. He knows how to raise me. Yeah. They say Allah What's the Farsi? He bande parvari ro khuda balade. That means that Allah is the one who knows how to take care of His bande, right? Not us. That will live in His hands. I'm just giving Him stuff to work with, okay? Which is my actions, which is, doing what I need to do. Make sense? All right. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.